Chapter 1: The Day the Aliens Learned a Lesson. The Galactic Dominion had conquered countless worlds. Their empire stretched across galaxies, subjugating species after species, absorbing their technology, enslaving their populations, and harnessing their resources. No civilization had ever withstood their might. When their fleets descended on a planet, resistance crumbled like sand in a storm. The Dominion was a well-oiled machine, with thousands of species falling under their reign. So when they discovered Earth, they assumed it would be no different from the others. The Dominion's fleet arrived in the Sol system with quiet precision. They had learned long ago not to announce their presence. The less time a planet had to organize resistance, the smoother the takeover. As the command ship hovered just beyond Earth's atmosphere, its admiral, Zarek, studied the swirling blue and green orb. It was an unremarkable planet, by his estimation. Nothing compared to the glittering jewel worlds of the core or the sprawling metropolises of the Dominion's heartlands. It was primitive, with technology that could barely break free of its own gravity. "They're not even spacefaring," Zarek muttered to himself as he reviewed the preliminary reports on human civilization. "This will be simple." Zarek was a veteran of 100 invasions. He'd seen everything from warriors to philosophers crumble beneath the might of the Dominion. Primitive species like humans usually provided some initial resistance, but it was usually futile. After all, what could beings who hadn't even reached interstellar travel hope to accomplish against an empire that spanned galaxies? He issued the order to deploy the ground troops, confident that within hours, Earth would be under Dominion control. The invasion begins. Across Earth, the skies opened up. Massive ships appeared over major cities, blotting out the sun in some places. The world's governments scrambled in confusion and fear, their military forces gearing up for battle with an enemy they had never anticipated. Panic rippled through the population as people stared at the impossible a fleet of alien ships descending from the heavens. The initial strike was surgical. The Dominion's forces hit key communication centers, disabling global networks within minutes. Power grids in many major cities were cut, plunging parts of the world into darkness. The aliens moved with precision, setting up command centers and deploying patrols in the chaos. Their goal was not total destruction, at least not yet. They wanted humanity alive, docile, and enslaved. Humans, for the most part, reacted the way the Dominion expected. Governments collapsed into confusion, civilians ran in terror, and military forces, no matter how advanced by Earth standards, were like ants before a boot. The initial waves of resistance were quickly crushed by superior firepower and technology. It looked like Earth would fall within days, just like so many worlds before it. But Earth was different. Humanity was different. The resistance. In the early days, the Dominion underestimated the humans. Earth's initial response was chaotic, but not because they were weak. It was because humans were unpredictable. There was no centralized power, no singular system of governance that could be easily decapitated. When the Dominion cut off the power, governments and militaries didn't stop, they improvised. Across the globe, small groups of civilians and soldiers banded together. Some took to the streets. Some took to the shadows. Radio frequencies that the Dominion thought they had silenced crackled back to life, as amateur ham operators and tech-savvy civilians bypassed the disabled infrastructure. In remote areas, isolated from the main cities, militias formed, armed with whatever they could find. Resistance networks sprang up almost overnight, operating with an efficiency that baffled the alien invaders. At first, the Dominion thought these resistance cells were just the dying gasps of a primitive species. They sent ground troops to crush the uprisings, but the humans fought back harder than expected. What the aliens couldn't understand was humanity's tenacity when cornered. They didn't break, they adapted. They learned quickly. Where one resistance cell was crushed, two more would spring up, even more organized and prepared. Zarek's ground commanders started reporting problems. In several areas, small groups of humans had managed to sabotage Dominion equipment, disabling transporters, hacking into comm systems, and in one case, even hijacking a Dominion walker and using it to destroy an entire squadron of troops. They are persistent. one of his officers reported, his voice tinged with annoyance. We underestimated their resourcefulness. Zarek frowned at the report, but he wasn't worried. Persistence was common in the early days of a planetary invasion. The Dominion's strategy was patience. They didn't need to crush resistance immediately. The humans would wear themselves out, grow tired, and eventually succumb to the overwhelming superiority of the Dominion's forces. Or so, Zarek thought. The captives. It wasn't long before the Dominion's forces began rounding up human captives. Large groups were taken from cities and transported to holding camps for processing. The plan was simply use fear and intimidation to break the human spirit. Once the initial shock of invasion had passed, they would begin the process of enslavement, indoctrinating the humans into the Dominion's order. But something strange happened in the camps. The humans didn't break. In fact, they grew stronger. In one of the largest camps, just outside a ruined city, the Dominion's overseers watched with growing unease as the human prisoners communicated in secret. They passed messages, formulated escape plans, and despite the grim conditions, they maintained an air of defiance. Whenever one of the overseers tried to intimidate a prisoner, they were met with cold stares and mocking grins. "They're planning something," one of the overseers reported. "They aren't like the others. Most species break after a few days, but these humans—" "Keep them under control," Zarek ordered, irritated by the growing reports of resistance. "They'll break. It's only a matter of time." But the humans didn't break. Instead, they waited. They waited until the right moment, when Dominion patrols were lax, when the guards grew comfortable in their dominance. And then they struck. One night, a group of humans managed to overpower their alien guards, using nothing but makeshift weapons and brute force. The escape triggered a chain reaction. Other camps soon followed suit, and before long, the human prisoners were not just escaping, they were taking over. By the time Zarek realized what was happening, it was too late. The humans had already armed themselves with the very weapons that were supposed to enslave them. Across the planet, captured Dominion tech was being repurposed and used against the invaders. The turning point. The first major turning point in the invasion came in a small, seemingly insignificant city. The Dominion had set up a forward base there, intending to use it as a staging ground for further operations. What they didn't realize was that the humans had been preparing an assault for weeks. The human resistance fighters had studied the Dominion's movements, learning their routines, exploiting weaknesses in their patrols. And when the time came, they struck with terrifying precision. The battle lasted less than an hour, but by the end, the Dominion's forces were routed, their base destroyed, and their remaining troops in retreat. What stunned the Dominion the most was not the ferocity of the human attack, but the fact that they had done it with a fraction of the resources and technology. Humans had taken the Dominion's advanced equipment and found ways to turn it against them. Proving their adaptability was more than just a fluke, it was a weapon. Word of the victory spread quickly. Across Earth, other resistance groups took inspiration, launching their own attacks. The Dominion, which had once believed this planet would fall like all the others, suddenly found themselves in a war they had never anticipated. The final stand. Weeks turned into months. What was supposed to be a quick and decisive invasion had turned into a bloody war of attrition. Zarek's forces were stretched thin, his supply lines disrupted, and worst of all, his troops were losing morale. The humans didn't just fight, they thrived in the chaos. The tipping point came when a large-scale Dominion assault was planned against a key human stronghold. Zarek was certain this attack would crush the humans once and for all. His fleet moved into position, launching wave after wave of troops and ships toward the human defenses. But the humans were ready. Using the knowledge they had gained from months of fighting, the humans had constructed traps and fortifications that turned the battlefield into a nightmare for the invading forces. They lured the Dominion troops into ambushes, disabled their ships with MPs, and used guerrilla tactics to harass and exhaust the enemy. At the heart of the battle was a human general, a former soldier who had risen through the ranks of the resistance. His leadership was as ruthless as it was effective. He had no illusions about the cost of victory. Humanity had to fight with everything they had, or they would be wiped out. And under his command, the humans fought with a level of ferocity that stunned the Dominion. Zarek, watching from his command ship, felt a growing sense of dread. This was not how the invasion was supposed to go. His forces were superior in every way, but somehow the humans were turning the tide. They had taken the Dominion's greatest strength, its technology, and used it against them. The final blow came when the humans launched a surprise counterattack, using a captured Dominion warship to infiltrate the fleet. The human strike team, led by the general himself, boarded Zarek's command ship in a daring assault. By the time Zarek realized what was happening, it was too late.